left-hand side, this is a DEMA promo, and here, the QR code. If you got a phone, you can take a picture of the QR code. It will take you directly to the DEMA site that discusses the Dive Boat Act. Now, if you don't have one and you're trying to figure out, it's real simple. Just do a search for DEMA, the Dive Boat Act. That'll take you exactly where you need to go. If you want to voice your opinion or your disagreement with this additional liability that the boating people have to take on, you can go right in. You can do it by phone. You can do it by email. You can send information to your state or your representative, and that will actually help guide you through to find who your representative is in your area. So if you're not in Ohio, you're in Indiana, any other state in the United States, it'll help get that information to you or your representative and what you need to tell them. So it's very important. Now, I'm just going to state this. This is specifically to boats that work in the United States. If we're going to the Caribbean or you're going overseas, this doesn't affect that. It doesn't cover that. But a lot of us go out of Lake Erie, do shipwreck diving. They get all those boats that leave in the United States side. They will be affected by this. So it's real simple. Just do a search for DEMA, the Dive Boat Act. That'll take you right where you need to go. If you have your phone, you can click the QR code, and that'll take you also where you need to go. That's it for the Legislative Committee for Ohio Council.
All right. Appreciate that, Scott. So I've been reading the comments here from people coming in, and I never hit the go button. So my whole monologue and probably the first 15 seconds of your speech there didn't go out. Nobody's seen that but us. So rookie mistake there. Sorry about that to everybody. Dive Boat Act, DEMA.org. Check it out. So for those of you that are on there joining us, and it seems like we just have a few people jumping on. We appreciate that, everybody that's here. And you can leave comments. We'll throw them up once we start the program. If you have questions, you can bring them up and we'll get them answered. So for those of you who are just joining us, the reason we're here tonight is to discuss panic. Our guests tonight have a podcast where you can find that on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your favorite podcast, the Great Dive Podcast, hosted by Brandon Schwartz and James Mott. James is a PADI instructor and look at that, found my notes. James is an instructor for the Unified Team of Diving International. He's also became a PADI instructor in 1998. And when he is not doing podcasts, you can find him at See the World Scuba in Farmington Hills, Michigan. Brandon Schwartz started his diving career in 1986 while in the Air Force station in the Mediterranean. In 1991, he went to, I've got this wrote down wrong, I know, the Eastern School of Diving. Correct me on that when I bring you up, Brandon. I'm sorry about that. Where he became a hard hat diver, chamber operator, continued his career in 1999. He became a PADI instructor and also a tech diver at that time. Both these gentlemen are avid cold water divers here in the Great Lakes region. That makes them better than most divers in the world. Just ask us, we'll tell you. Just kidding. So without further ado, I am going to bring up Brandon and Jamesy. Sure am. How about that?
There's one.
Hey. See, this is what that happens when they let the kids play with the grown-up toys.
There we go.
It's grown-ups with kids' toys.
Yeah. So for some reason we're having trouble on Facebook, but we're just going to keep cranking along here on YouTube, and we'll try to figure that out later. But so James, and so the reason I coaxed you guys here with beer and stickers bars was to get you to talk about one of your episodes where you were talking about panic. It just so happens that during about the time that I found this podcast or heard this podcast, I had just experienced a nice little panic situation myself, so it kind of hit home. And I've always felt, as you know, and you mentioned this a couple times, that we don't talk enough about panic and getting the situations that get us into there. So you were talking about an article from Sienna Yeager out of the Scuba Diving News or Scuba Diving Magazine, kind of. And she brings up some good points about training. You guys want to kind of open up with what brought you to this article? Kind of what you liked about the topic or why you chose it for this particular podcast.
Well, Steve, it's one of the topics when you look back throughout scuba diving magazines for the last many decades, the last 50 plus years of skin diver magazines and whatnot. I mean, it seems to be one of the most reoccurring topics that you come across, stories and firsthand accounts and editorials. And it is something that's brought up a lot, I would say, in scuba training. It's a question on the quiz. It's a question on the final exam, and most everybody gets that question right, should I panic on a dive, true or false? Nobody gets that wrong. However, when you look at the data that she brought up in that article, I mean, it shows that almost 50% of the fatal accidents, are panic related. 20% of them she quoted as being directly related to panic, and another over 20% were, issues that were probably, something led to panic. So you're talking almost, 50% of the issues. So it is a big thing, and it's not just something that you get the question right on the quiz. I mean, nobody gets that wrong, but underwater, it's a whole different game.
Yeah, James, I'd also add, it's probably underreported because people have incidents all the time. They panic and they live. Nothing gets reported. And it just goes on and doesn't contribute to the stat. So.
Right. And she brings that up in the article that, being scared underwater is rational, that someplace that we're not supposed to be. But you guys spoke to that point on the podcast about being, ready for these things and being overtrained. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Do you know what the panic triangle is? Are you guys familiar with that at all? There's the panic triangle, which are just like the fire triangle. You heard of the fire triangle, which is heat, fuel, and oxygen to have a fire. You need those things. You need the same things with panic. So with panic, you've got a trigger. You've got to have a what's called a regulation or regulatory system. In other words, a way to deal with the panic. And then you have to have preparedness. And when you have one of those legs fail, you have panic, is what they say. So that's kind of where these doctors and these scientists doing all their studies in the psychology of panic, that's what they look into. With diving, we look at the preparedness of a diver, which is how well are they trained, and how easily are they accessible to that training. In other words, sure, they got certified, they know how to share gas in their open water training, but 4 years later, they haven't practiced any gas sharing, and a situation pops up. There goes the preparation. So that's one of the legs that go out.
Yeah, and a lot of the triggers, I mean, triggers can happen to any diver at any time, and it's not so much that it's the trigger that causes the panic as much as the how you react to the situation. Once that occurs, or maybe I should better say how you fail to properly react, only because it wasn't overly practiced into you as a way to keep moving throughout the situation in a controlled and competent way.
Yeah, and that's you guys, shit. I'm horrible at this.
It's all right.
I want to do this for a living. Can you see that happen?
You're doing fine. You're doing fine. You should listen to our first 50 shows. There.
And she says that, that you rehearse the basics. And I think in this area of the country, we're very fortunate to have the quarries as conveniently located as we are, because we get an opportunity to go there and, not only fun dive, but work on some of these skills. What are some of the things that, we should be working on these, even if we're just in the quarry kicking around, what are some skill, what are some of these things that we need to drill over and over again, that are going to make us act instead of react?
Well, I mean, any of the skills out of the training program, if you really look at what a certification is supposed to represent, shouldn't really need to be practiced, right? Because you've got a certification card that says you already have it, and that's the problem that we're facing with divers. The issue is, I think, more that most instructors are on such a time restriction for getting somebody through a class for such a a competitively priced program, that they don't have the time to really build a philosophical base to draw from. They don't have a mindset to really have practiced and work on and continue to develop year after year after year after year after year in a regular, comfortable way. I mean, scuba training, was turned, in the mid 60s into a business program rather than an educational program. And this is the result that we have today, in my opinion.
Yeah. So training, I think that's probably, that's the big thing, right? I mean, we want more bang for our buck, but at the same time, if we start cutting corners with our training and how do you decide between value and quality? And, as an instructor, huge. How do you make your class affordable yet, work it out to where you can not only train them the way to the quality that you want to, but still make it viable for you as a business?
They work against each other.
Yeah.
Okay. So quality training is not cheap. It all depends on what price tag you put on your safety and the value of your scuba diving to you. To me, I say it in the podcast, diving is life. I've been diving for going on 40 years and I love it. And if I didn't have it, I'd be going nuts. So I put a large value on it. And I thank God I found the right people, and like you were saying, that school I went to was the Divers Academy of the Eastern Seaboard, but I was also an instructor for GUE. And when I found those guys, they opened my eyes to, wait, this is what was missing out of my diving, this approach, not necessarily GUE per se, but the approach to the diving. I had done technical diving by several of the other agencies, technical trimix, full cave certified, all that. I had to go and redo it all because it was a completely different approach. And I think that's part of what we talk about, isn't it, James? It's you can go get the $99 special. You can go get and you might get lucky and get a decent instructor, but you're still not going to get as good as you could have got if you did a little research and found a high quality instructor that is passionate about that.
Yeah, man. What I said a minute ago that the scuba education was moved into a business model back in the 1960s so that it could become a way for the entire world to learn how to dive. You run into that issue of cost justification versus spending time with people. It's a whole just thinking of the way you're going to present the game that we play. I mean, in a world today, you look at, because we made a couple of martial arts references in that, nobody's watching the championship, UFC match, right? None of those guys took a weekend Brazilian jiu-jitsu class and showed up to fight in the UFC. There's a bunch of media talking right now about Mike Tyson, getting ready to come back and do this big fight. I mean, he didn't, go to a boxing school for a week. I mean, here's a guy that's been actively training for 50 plus years because he's passionate about it, not because he got a Groupon special on it, not because it was convenient and easy. He did it because of heart and passion and love for what he's doing. And what I meant by making scuba a business model is we got away from that back then into hey, we can teach them enough to get them their palate wet and their tongue appetized for little nuggets here and there, but it didn't put anybody on a lifelong path of continuously training, continuously working. It was all focused around a little piece of plastic card that represented everything,
and it sold a lot of gear.
Yeah.
But as we know, the scuba community, people are, filing out at an alarming rate. They come in, they don't stay long, and then they leave. Unlike, some other communities that are along the same lines as scuba as far as a hobby.
So, Brandon, you mentioned, that GUE changed the way you look at how you approach diving.
Right.
Were you referring to the team approach? Is that's something
among other things, Steve? It was more holistic. You don't just go and learn to breathe. The equipment separate. Everything works together, including your team, including the divers you're in the water with, and including the boat captain, the dive master, including your instructors. So everybody's part of this giant team that you surround yourself with. And we all share the same mindset, not only before we get in the water, but while we're in the water and afterwards, as far as the approach to diving, right?
The team approach.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's more than just a couple guys in the water who happen to be diving, near each other, maybe, or
right.
Girls or whoever. It's everyone that's involved with it, from the training standpoint to the actual dive to the dive support team.
I see.
So I think James is with UTD, and they have pretty much the exact same mindset.
Yeah, it's a team philosophy. It's I mean, I'm not afraid to say DIR. I mean, it's all DIR based, which was became a dirty couple of letters to say for a long time. But I think people are starting to realize it again. Of it wasn't the fight that it was a couple of decades ago, because everyone's kind of migrating towards this now, and a lot of those concepts that were so controversial back in 2000 are now in almost every training manual's materials. The words that you could only find from one source back in 2005, and now everybody's using it and talking about it. But just like we had said earlier, just getting the quiz question right of don't panic does not mean that person's never going to panic underwater. Like, you can sit there and talk about it on the dive boat. Hey, whatever you do today, don't panic if the shit is the fan.
Yeah, thanks.
People still panic, and the excrement is definitely hitting the oscillator, and things get worse and worse and worse. It's not because they don't know not to panic. It's because they've never been put into the situation underwater where they had a situation, and now losing buoyancy has some serious repercussions. Now losing visibility and forgetting where you're at and how to get home has some serious consequences to it. Losing your teammates in the water with you has a big serious consequence.
And
That's
you need that.
Just getting the quiz question right.
Right. Well, you need that shown to you, right, James? In your training, you have to somehow be put through that type of training. You can't just fake it. You can't have a staged show of it. You have to be put through it to a certain degree. That way, you're better prepared when it actually happens, and you also are demonstrated a way to train. We talked about practice makes perfect is not really a true statement, in the sense of, if you're practicing the wrong things, you're just reinforcing a bad idea or a bad skill or a bad practice. So you have to know what is good practice and how to approach it, and why you're practicing. And it all goes to panic, Steve. I mean, ultimately, this all goes back to a prevention of panic, streamlining and good trim and a good propulsion technique. That all keeps CO2 down. CO2 is at the heart of this panic cycle. It's really at the very center of the snowball, the CO2 buildup.
Yeah, and that was. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the points that you kind of felt like she might have overlooked a little bit, or did maybe not hit as hard in that article. She did mention the hypoxia, but you kind of delved into what causes that buildup a little bit more. Could you maybe elaborate on that? And then also, maybe both you guys talk, before I forget to ask, team versus buddy. We've been throwing, I know what you guys are talking about because I've heard this, and I'm going to say that Steve Schwartz is also a fan, because he heard your last podcast. I'm gonna say, just because of his comment. So
thanks, Steve.
So yeah, if you could talk about that a little bit, the team versus the buddy, and then kind of go into that, what causes that, the short breath and
Okay.
stuff like that, please.
James, you want to take team, and I'll take CO2?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Hit that one first, because that's
okay. CO2. So the basics of CO2. CO2 is our driver for our urge to breathe. Not oxygen, not lack of oxygen, CO2 buildup in our blood. And it's not necessarily the percentage. It's a relationship of the percentage with the surrounding pressure. So as we go deeper, that pressure increases, which increases the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, which gives us, I have to breathe. Okay. It's not a lack of oxygen. We get plenty of oxygen. We're not going hypoxic. We get way more than enough oxygen. What we do get is a buildup of carbon dioxide from not being streamlined, working too hard, from bad buoyancy control. Today, and kind of going over a few things for this little show, I'm looking at a bunch of panic videos on YouTube of actual footage, and almost every single one, the panic ensues, and you can hear their breathing rates. And their breathing rates are in the 30 to 40 respirations a minute, which are double to triple what we should be as an adult. And they're shallow, so they're not breathing correctly. They're not getting rid of the carbon dioxide. It's building, which is just giving them the urge to breathe even more. So you're starting this ugly cycle, and then you feel as if you're not getting any breath from your regulator. And so a lot of folks mistake this as the I'm over breathing my regulator syndrome, which very difficult to do, extremely difficult to do, especially in 100 feet up, really difficult to do. So all you do is you just started that snowball going, and then they spit the rag out, the hands go flailing. A lot of times the mask flies off and they go clawing up for the surface. And it's, it all starts with that that CO2. And as we know, like I said, we're not hypoxic. We have plenty of oxygen. We don't hardly need at 66 feet, you're at 3 attas. You don't need much oxygen. So, does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah.
as a cursory explanation of CO2 drives us to breathe. As we go deeper, the CO2 partial pressure increases. So we only need minute amounts building up in our bloodstream and our tissue. And that just tells us breathe more, breathe more. So as you try to breathe more, the gas is getting denser because you're going deeper. Your lungs are not exchanging gas, and you're just collecting more and more carbon dioxide. So,
the whole notion
panic,
of the whole notion of I couldn't breathe through my regulator. My regulator was too hard to breathe. I couldn't get any gas. It's got really nothing to do with the function of the equipment. It's just the CO2 has been so deeply enriched that it's a psychological response that they think that they're running out of air. They think that they don't have anything to breathe. They think that the regulator's working. But like
you see it all the time.
Jaeger mentioned in the article, I mean, the overwhelming majorities, the people are found with gas in their cylinders,
plenty
with
of gas,
perfectly working equipment. So it's a false pretense of what's really going on, and it just comes from working your ass off underwater.
Have you ever I have felt in commercial school, we're actually working, where I've got to stop, take the helmet, and just turn the gas up all the way and just let it go, so I can get that urge to breathe, that driving CO2 force to come down. And it's all about exhaling, getting rid of that CO2. Underwater scuba, I try to never work, and that's what I tell my students. If you're working, you're doing it wrong.
Yes.
So,
I did my first side mount class Saturday in the pool, and I worked the whole time. There's definitely a curve there.
Yes.
That's a lot of task loading.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Steve. I think that's a great example of that's why learning and practicing how to do it right or correctly, or however you want to say, and getting it down to where you're not working is so critical. So it's so important to diving well.
Well, the thing I'd ask Steve is, did you get your side mount card at the end of that?
No, I still have Corey sessions. No, I'm not ready for a card yet.
And I think that was the difference of what I was trying to say earlier is, so, the side mount class, or really any scuba class, is sold as like a one price, no different than a steak on a menu, right? You buy it, you get it, you enjoy it, it's yours, and it's done. Versus, somebody who wants to learn music, enters that world for years, if not decades, if not a lifetime. Somebody who enters martial arts, enters that school, not so that they can get, their, front kick card at the end of the weekend. And now I can throw a good front kick and keep enemies away. No, they enter that school for, regular lessons and regular intervals at an extremely long, slow pace in order to, make this something that's so ingrained in your body that when something does go wrong, it just comes out of you because it's instinctual, right? In a place where second nature will get you killed, right? Because second nature is not good enough. It's got to be so well trained that it's instinctual in you, and it just happens. That's when the training has come, and then as soon as you think that you're there, right? The really tenured student, or the really adept pupil will realize, actually, I'm still right back at the beginning. Yeah. Right. And now that I'm getting it, the first clue is don't get too cocky and keep at it.
Oh, once you got your black belt, you don't get beat up anymore, right? Isn't that what we learned?
I know plenty of people that thought that. And
well, there's Dave's got a good point there.
Support the theory.
Yeah, Maslow's laws of learning. All of that applies to scuba diving, and And James and I mention it all the time on the podcast. It's a journey. It's not a destination. You're not going to get there. It's not like, oh, I got it. You know, you can set little goals, but you have to work towards them and continue the journey. And it's rewarding, I think.
Yes, it's very rewarding. It's I have a goal, and I think when I get to that point where I can just stay in the water column without moving, I'm going to stop, because I will have become the perfect diver, and I can just stop. I won't dive anymore. I will have accomplished everything that I've set out to do. And all right, so Jennifer has a question here. Any tips for managing panic responses? Here, I'm going to put it up there, and you guys can read it just as easily. But she asks, any tips for panic response in the overthinker? I have a family member who is about to start the pool session, and she is ultra aware.
Yeah. So first off, like, don't let her get into the false sense that, you know, her 3-day weekend class and 2 open water dives is going to teach her what she needs to know. She's going to have to get into a program where the only way she's going to get comfortable enough is going to be, it's going to start by being competent in her skills and her learning and confident in what she does underwater, so that she can be more comfortable and more aware, so that she isn't racing through the possibility of a multitude of different things to choose from. The only way she's going to narrow that down to one response is going to be to internalize what she's doing underwater, rather than have it always be a multiple choice question. And that's only going to come with time.
Yeah, she went on to say that she's asking about training that's far beyond what she's going to be getting, and you know, some advice. She's asking for some advice to reassure and help keep her, you know, focused on the task at hand, rather than working on a rescue before she's got her open water.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you got to learn to scuba dive. You know, so there's, you know, scuba's new. There's equipment that you got to learn. There's some new lingo and jargon you got to learn. There's some new rules you got to learn. There's some skills you got to learn. But once you learn all of that stuff, in my opinion, you know, that's where, you know, when people want to come to do and learn like this philosophy that, you know, this old DIR philosophy, or this team approach to diving, unfortunately, you already got to be a diver in order to come do it, to where I can say, okay, now I can actually teach you to be a diver. You got to be a diver to really learn how to be a diver. So get her, I would say, you know, yeah, Jennifer, get her in class, get her comfortable, that so she's got a certification card in her hand, so she can get on a boat with you, go down to the Caribbean with you, go do some fun dives in the Keys, go do some fun dives in the quarry. But the problem I think that we have, Steve, is that so many people are just set up that, you know, I get my C card. They said don't go past 60 feet, but the book was telling me about 130, you know, back on chapter 2, you know, and then they get in the first trip down to Mexico, the dive master's like, I'm not going to get a good dip unless I take you to the wall and drop you past 100 feet. So, you know, everybody's going down there. I mean, if you've been in this game long enough, you can, there's a huge number of people that are in that 100-foot and beyond with less than 20 dives and only 1 certification to their belt. That's the problem.
And thankfully, diving is ultra forgiving, but it builds that idea like what's never going to happen to me.
That sense of overconfidence, where, you know, you know, because you know, I've skirted that. You know, I've been past, you know, don't tell my insurance company that, but you know, we've all done it. You know, we've all slipped, whatever. But yeah, I think that's you know, you mentioned there's a lot of acronyms and things that we got to learn, and you mentioned you know, some of, you know, one of them is S, stop, breathe, think, and act. And I know we Jamesy interacted with some people on Facebook today talking about this, and then I wanted to make sure we brought that up, because the the acronym that was brought up online was stop, think, and react.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one thing that I liked. The point that you made in the podcast was, train until it's an action rather than a reaction. So, but
I was just trying. So I was trying to think of another funny acronym that would be better appropriate.
this is PG, man.
You're on the spot.
It's PG, man.
Right, that's where I was going. I was trying to think what could we do that was SHIT. Stop,
chip high in transit.
Investigate.
Stop, have a beer.
If only with that acronym, we would never have the problem. But that's not it. It's not having the right acronym. I mean, the acronym doesn't matter. It can be, dippity doo. Who cares what the acronym is? That, right? Just getting the acronym correct on the exam isn't the answer. It's not having the right checklist. I mean, the answer is having the time and experience in the water that you don't have to think about stop, breathe, think, and act when a problem arises. You just know that when something goes wrong, you have to be in control of your depth. You have to know if you've got the gas, right? And you should know that before it happens. You check your depth, you check your gauge. Okay, now I can handle the situation. I can't do that if my breathing's out of control and I'm losing buoyancy. I have to be in control. So that's got to be ingrained into you with a certain type of training that's the focus. And if you learn to scuba dive negatively buoyant on the bottom of your knees or doing a fin pivot, touching the bottom, you don't have ingrained into you what buoyancy control is, let alone when you're trying to deal with it while somebody's having a problem.
Panic situation.
Yeah, and you start to panic.
That makes it difficult.
And I mean, nobody goes into the dive and says, "Hey, I'm going to run out of air, and I'll give you this sign, and then you come and give me gas." And nobody goes down and says, "Hey, can you give me your mask?" They just whack it off your face and they just grab your regulator. That's how it goes. And there's none of that training going on. So when it happens, of course, panic ensues.
Sure, for both divers at that.
Yeah, they've never seen it. It's not in their training, and from the either point of view.
Yeah, I mean, nobody says I'm gonna blow a marker bag for practice and get the line my mask ripped off the surfaces. The bag goes right. Those are things that just happen. But if every time that you've been trying to do your practice isn't in a situation that mimics the reality of a dive, well, what you're practicing is exactly what Brandon was saying earlier: is you're practicing wrong, right? It's not just practicing. You got to practice in a way that's conducive to the underwater world. And we look at CO2 getting out of hand, and we know that CO2 is a lead up to a lot of cardiac events. And if you're doing this stuff while you're out mountain biking or you're out rock climbing, or you're doing things really anywhere in any other activity in the world, you can stop, you can sit down on a bench, pull out your water bottle. You can take a half an hour to clear your head about how bad and nervous and scared you just got. That doesn't exist underwater. We're in a completely different world underwater where depth is a problem, gas availability is a problem, decompression is eventually going to become a problem. Just going to the surface where you assume safety is probably the worst place you could be at this exact moment. So you really only have one choice, and that's if I've got gas and I can breathe, well, then I've got to calm down and realize that I can't just bail out. I got to solve this problem here now and do it in a way that gets everybody home, not just me in a panic that bends me or embolizes me or me and a buddy along the way. That doesn't make the situation any better.
No, it doesn't. So is this a good point to talk about planning the pause? And
sure.
And taking that time, before you make any kind of adjustments underwater, whether it be a directional change or getting ready to surface, she talks about planning the pause, taking a moment to assess your gear, your buddy, and your environment. What are your guys' thoughts on that? How do you, where do you weigh in on that?
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, well, we've got we had a funny little comment that we made in a show really early on in Great Dive Podcast, and one of our listeners made up a really great sticker that is a very sought after sticker from us that says, "Don't touch my fucking shit." And it just goes to so many people make the assumption that once they hook their gear up or the dive master checks their gear, they're fine for the whole rest of the dive, right? The instructor came over and gave me the pat on the back, everything's good. But there's many stories out there of stuff getting shut off, between dives, and we don't realize it. We got carried away on the surface and completely forgot to switch tanks, and I'm entering dive number 2 with the same dive that I ended dive number 1 on. You got the dive master flirting with the bikini girl behind his back, and he's shutting a valve off on your tank instead of opening the valve all the way on in a quarter turn, that whole thing. So just assuming that all of that stuff is taken care of for you, doing a pre-dive check, like begin with review and friend, where you have somebody else check all of your stuff for you, does not put you in a place of ownership of the equipment that you have and the people you have in the water with you. So, when we get in the water, that we've got a routine of, I assume, and Brando assumes, and anybody we dive with assumes, that we don't know what could have happened. We confirm all that stuff before we start the dive. We're in the water, but the regs are where they're supposed to be. The gas is where it's supposed to be. The valves are where they're supposed to be. And at the beginning, yeah, it's a lot of work because it's a lot happening. But when we do it now, it takes less than a minute to have that reassurance.
Yeah, that's true. So being able to foresee when you're losing your cool, right? That's what you're saying. Being able to kind of anticipate, being able to see a problem before it happens. You guys talked about that in the podcast about keeping your cool, being little Fonzies. He made the reference to Pulp Fiction, which is one of the greatest movies ever made. But we all want to be. So what's some signs when you're about to lose your Fonziness, when you're about to go from nice relaxing dive into it's gonna splatter all over the wall. You
Go for it, Brando.
What are going to be some triggers that that a diver could hey, my respirations are starting to pick up a little bit. I might need to. So,
that right there, the hand movement is a big one. If we're talking about underwater, those are things I look at. Constant looking at the gauges. This is more of what I look at in other divers when we go on any charter boat. The people who talk too much on the boat, these are all very common. You'll see it, and they're mostly signs of somebody who's nervous and isn't really. When you get that level of nervousness, I think you lose a little bit of your awareness level. You get focused or hyper focused. But those are things I look at. Look at the way their gear's assembled. Look at their posture in the water, the hand motions, the constant kicking or the loss of buoyancy or trim. All of those things are keys. And just not what I would call proper diving. So I don't know, James. What else? If we're talking on the surface, it's one thing. When you're talking underwater, it's another thing. But they're all part of being aware of your environment when you as a diver are going on a dive with strangers or with people
Yeah, and the only way you're going to find out is you've got to be in the water with somebody who can put you in a situation where you have to break your normal pattern and find out how you react. You have to have somebody who can intimately show you what your personal idiosyncrasies are on the water, and you've got to know them and learn them so that you can know who you are yourself as a diver, or you're never gonna have a chance at that.
Yeah, I agree. So talking this over, I mean, a lot of us, we don't, especially men, we don't like to, hey, I kind of freaked out a little bit there. I come up over that, and I got a little squeeze in my ear, and whatever. We don't debrief as thoroughly as we should. What are some things that we can do to maybe cure that as amongst ourselves as divers? I mean, how can we change the culture to where it's okay to say, hey, I was a little uncomfortable when we, maybe I shouldn't have went into that wreck as far as I did, or,
Well, I think that's the mindset game we were talking about
Mhm.
earlier, Steve. I mean, it's the debrief is the most important part of the whole process
Learning.
of communication, to keep the loop going, so that the learning and the thinking and the development of the activity that you're trying to do has a chance to grow. Without that, it's just open ended, and you're going to keep doing the same mistakes over and over and over again.
Yeah, this is all part of like human factors. I don't know if you're aware of human factors in diving with Gareth Locke and his organization that has some great classes and great information on exactly this, which is that just culture, that we have to make it okay to admit mistakes. So that's the only way we're going to learn to avoid them or work through them somehow. But as long as we want to keep I don't know if you want to call it being ego driven, and I don't make mistakes and I was never out of control kind of thing, we're not going to get past it. So,
well, hopefully that part will change. Got a
one
couple.
diver at a time.
Pardon me?
I was just saying, one diver at a time. We each do our part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Best
Which
we
is
can do.
Brandon's other favorite quote from Pulp Fiction. Ezekiel 25:17. That's something I wrote down.
That was a great scene. That was a great scene. Yeah. But so Linda's got a question, and Linda asks, if you had one tip to give a new diver, what would it be?
Listen to the Great Dive podcast.
Don't buy split.
What was yours, James?
Don't buy split fins.
Don't buy split fins. That's
I thought you said don't buy
I don't
flip.
know. Seriously though, James, take this because
My serious one is going to be trust yourself, trust your training, trust your technique. Don't put all your faith into equipment.
and don't stop learning.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to continually be learning.
Yes, I agree. Is there any more questions out there? I really am sorry that we didn't get on Facebook. I think we would have had much more viewers had we. So a message came out from StreamYard about a week ago, saying that after the 1st of April, Facebook wasn't going to support direct streams anymore. So maybe that they're experiencing the problems already, unfortunately for us tonight.
You post a little link out there on Facebook tomorrow. Is this going to be on the YouTube page?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Yep.
Post a little link to
We'll
it.
post a link.
Yep. We'll post some links to it, and I'm going to make some shorts out of it if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, it'd be great.
And I will put a link to the Great Dive podcast in the description of this YouTube video below. So everybody make sure you check them out wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Scott, do you have anything else?
So I was kind of listening to the whole thing, and I had my question was, as a diver, you want to kind of lean into, I don't want to call it panic mode, but there's some things you can think of that might help a new diver say, I don't want to instantly go right into panic, but something small that they could do that they have to overcome and be more comfortable with while they're in the water, while they're diving. Our old one was always, see what you can do by just taking your mask off and putting it back on. Can you do that underwater, repeatedly? Is there any other ones you can think of that might help somebody new that just doesn't put them into panic, but there might be that little motion that you get, that apprehensive, that little extra breath, and maybe, being a little more agitated without going into panic. Can you think of anything else that might help?
I like the taking your mask off, because that's a big problem. If you've ever taught open water classes, that's like a big hiccup for probably a third of the students, a quarter of the students. But okay, take that one and do it in mid-water. Try to do it at 5 feet, hovering. Take your mask off, put it back on, hovering. Once you start doing things, the same skills you were taught in your open water class, but you can hold your depth without having to hold on to anything, and you don't, fall to the bottom or float to the surface. You're starting to get it a little. I mean, the hardest thing we ask divers to do in any of our classes is nothing. Just do nothing. Just see if you can sit in the water and do nothing in a good trim position. And it seems to be quite difficult. So yeah, take that skill, that mask, take it off, put it back on while you're doing nothing. I don't know, James, anything else?
Yeah, and like again, once you as an instructor, I'm assuming, Scott, you're talking from an educational standpoint, as a dive leader, once you're confident that they know how to deploy their octopus or whatever type of alternate air source system they're using in their class, rather than having it so regimented of your diver A kneeling here and your diver B kneeling here, and we have to do an air share, just doing it randomly, once you know that they've got the ability to show that they can do it and maintain their position in the water column. The masks is a big one. I mean, every scuba instructor in the world, regardless of agency, knows that that's the one of the big hiccups, like Brando said. And what tends to happen, or at least what I tend to see happen, is divers struggle with it, and they struggle with it. So the answer for most instructors is, come on over here to the corner of the pool, just kneel on the bottom, and in 3 feet of water, you can stand up whenever you want to stand up, and they'll spend a whole night practicing mask clears till they finally get to the point where they can finally get the water out of the mask without totally going into a panic. And then it's okay, shit, get them to the open water as fast as possible while they got it, and get them through that, and then now they never have to do it again. Right. And one of the longest standing jokes, that I remember as a young instructor was, when you come to your advanced class, you don't ever have to clear your mask once if you don't want to. That's all over. We're going to be moving on to other things.
No gas sharing, no mask clearing.
We would joke about it, but I mean, it's the worst thing you could possibly do, because nobody's willing to tell somebody you're not ready. Just stick with the training for a while. I mean, scuba is one of the only activities that I can think of that everybody is focused on how fast, how cheap, how little is the absolute minimum we got to do to get somebody through with this. There's very few people that have a long game approach to underwater education.
I think it should be a long game approach. I mean, and it seems like the longer I've been certified since 1991, but I've only been a diver since like 2016. Does that make any sense?
Sure. I know exactly what you mean by that, Steve.
So, yeah. And then, I took a big hiatus, and I mean, from, 91 until, 2015, 2016, when I got back into it, man, I mean, it was unrecognizable. I mean, so much stuff had advanced so quickly that it was, it was learning over completely again. And, like almost from dive one, because the whole industry and the whole training had changed. And we seem to take it a little bit more seriously now, or maybe I just was older and more aware of my mortality.
It's called wisdom, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say that it hasn't when you really look at it, it hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed.
It's changed quite a bit if everything that you do is technology based. If everything that you do is equipment based, You know, if you're focused on the flash of the technology to keep you safe and alive and underwater. But if you really look at the basic foundation of what you need as a diver, I don't think it's really changed much at all if you've had a good presentation and a good building block to learn from.
Yeah, the building blocks are essential, and I mean, even going into the new configuration, the basics are still there. You know, I mean, one of the challenges that the instructor brought up to me that should have been a no-brainer that I didn't really even dawn on me until he mentioned it was, well, you have a lot more gas now. You need to pay attention to your NDL. It's not like you were when you were on a single tank and you didn't have to worry about your NDL running up against your NDL. Now you have all this gas, and if you get distracted and you run in just things to be aware of that going in until it was brought to my attention, I never really considered that being.
That's the same reason why they told you that buoyancy control was a specialty class that you could take for another $200 somewhere down the road if it was convenient for you and you had the time, right? I mean these
that's a cornerstone.
Yeah, I mean, that's
a cornerstone.
That's the same thing, right? I mean, the problem is the industry. When I said it's built as a business model, not a diving education model, it's a business model in so much as they teach you one thing at the beginning, and then they keep stacking additional stuff that may or may not coincide with what you learned first, rather than having an end game approach of what do I need at the high end and building it all the way back so it stays smooth, relevant, and consistent. So that as a diver, you can keep growing and not having to keep starting over. I mean, if the model was built appropriately, even though you did take that hiatus, you should have been able to flow right back into where you were. But instead, you had to start all over again because the gear changed. The gear didn't really change that much. It's the mentality and the mindset about the equipment versus a real building block to what it takes to become a competent diver.
Yeah, Steve, just one more thing to add on here, and this is to what James is talking about, is the system we teach, or the way that we teach. My open water student from day one during a gas share does the exact same thing if he were an advanced trimix deep cave diver. It's the exact same muscle memory. It's the exact same gear configuration. There's a little bit more gear. Of course, the dive's more complex, but the muscle memory of those basic skills and the basic way they dive has not changed. You don't have to go and, okay, I know you learned to dive in this, but now we're going to switch you over to this gear. And then, now you've got to learn all this other stuff. It's just a constant building on with the base foundation still laid there. So you're only building into your muscle memory the longer you dive.
I guess what I meant as far as it changed. Nobody sat down at the picnic tables and figured out what group they were in. Nobody's doing their dive tables anymore. Everybody just looks at their wrists and says, oh, "Okay, I'm close to that NDL, whatever that means. I got to go back to the surface now. So my thing's turning yellow. I got to leave."
Well, see, that's because the class went from 2 weekends to 1 weekend. There's too much. The answer was, what can we cut out of this class that we used to do in 8 nights, and then went to 6 nights, and then went into 1 weekend? What can we keep chopping away to make it easier and easier and easier? Because the barrier of entry is what the business model of learning to scuba dive is afraid of.
Yeah. They want to, and the easier you make it, the more people you attract. Once you got them in there, you can sell them the equipment, but it doesn't keep the divers in because they have no understanding. We've tossed out the physics laws. We're too stupid to get that. So those are gone, which is sad to a great degree. Not that they're huge in there, but a good understanding of what's going on with the physics and physiology is key. It goes to that fundamental building block of being a good diver. What's going on, but you got guys been diving in advanced class, rescue class, all that. They don't know what Boyle's law is per se, or any of that stuff.
Right. Jennifer asks another question. She would like to know: Do you see training moving towards primary donation and long term?
I mean, that's the one that gets grabbed anyway. I mean, the rationale for trying to find the octo that's trailing behind you or wherever it is, there's really no good logic to it. The one that gets grabbed in almost all the circumstance of out of air situations is the one in the diver's mouth. So you might as well just give it to him.
Right.
No,
So
James?
do you?
Well, in the long term, I would hope so. I mean, Brandon and I have been teaching it for over 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
But in a time where we were laughed at for teaching, trying to bring this concept in at an early level. Now, you open up, the biggest big boxes of scuba training agencies, and you'll see people, breathing long hoses in their training materials, which is ironic from what they were saying to us, just 20 years ago.
All right. So you're teaching open water with a long hose primary donate?
Well, yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice.
And that's that whole building block approach. Don't relearn it again. I remember when I learned to dive, when I did my advanced class, I had to stop using a bunch of gear that I had got and get a bunch of
new stuff.
So I took my deep class. My deep diving instructor said, "Well, that's ridiculous. You're not going to use that. You got to get rid of that. You got to use TV. You got to switch to this over here." And then I took another class, and that instructor said, "That doesn't make any sense. You get rid of this."
Well, it does make sense from the point of view of it makes sense from the point of view of the business model.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure the shop owner appreciates it.
Yeah,
but I don't want to make it sound like we're anti buying gear, selling gear.
No,
that's not the point we're trying to make, because
actually the opposite.
Think, 3 out of the 4 of us in this conversation here, depend on people buying gear. So for our living. So don't want to take it make it sound like we're anti-gear selling or anything like that. Just well, I have been sold things that I didn't need.
That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they are out there. Just
I mean, if you look at, I can show you 3 current students that I have right now, and I can 100% guarantee you they've spent more money on equipment than probably 99% of every dive shop in America's average dive master, not even advanced open water, probably dive master of recreational. So it's not about not buying equipment.
But the difference being is they're going to stick. They are sticking with diving, and they're going to keep sticking with diving, versus do it for a couple years. The gear goes on eBay or in Marketplace or something, which you see all the time.
Right. So he wants to know, do you really need a sunscreen clip on your BC?
Dave's got some good questions.
Maybe I wouldn't put it on my BCD, but there might be an environment that I'm in on a liveaboard out in the middle of nowhere where you got the possibility of getting left at sea that maybe clipped off in a pocket on your leg might make sense, or on your BCD.
So as you're floating out there in the middle of nowhere, at least I got this sunscreen.
I'm a Hawaiian tropic man. What can I say?
There you go.
Oh. Well, I really appreciate your guys' time. We're not really getting any more questions coming in here, and we're over the hour mark. I think we did. I had a good time. I hope everybody that watched it enjoyed it. And
thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
A lot of great fun questions.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. It was fun. Scott, you got anything else you want to close with?
Just please go to DEMA, the Dive Boat Act, and take a peek at that. It's let your representative know that this is something you're not really agreeing on. You'd like to have them look into the change.
Absolutely. DEMA.org, Dive Boat Act. Check out our full summer schedule.
Yep, that's it.
OhioCouncil.org. and the Great Dive Podcast. All right. You know what? I'm really horrible at closing things. So if I was like one of those cool YouTube guys, I would play an exit video right now. But since I'm just
Well,
a
if it's
40
anything
hour,
like that intro, maybe we should skip it.
right? So yeah. So since I'm just a 40-hour schmuck, we're just gonna say goodbye and call it an evening. I really
Sounds good.
appreciate everybody. I hope everybody out there in YouTube land enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye,
Steve.
everyone.
Bye.
Peace.
Good night. Peace.